How Bolin had always believed his life was predictable, a series of carefully charted steps leading toward an uncertain destiny. Under the watchful eye of his uncle, Kaoxiang, Bolin's world revolved around the family empire. Kaoxiang's power and influence were undeniable, and Bolin had grown up in awe of the man, never daring to question why his parents were rarely in the picture. When his cousin Ming suggested they expand their business ventures into Lagos, Nigeria, Bolin leaped at the opportunity. The city's vibrancy and untapped potential were irresistible, offering him a rare chance to step out of Kaoxiang's shadow and prove his worth. It was a chance to breathe free air, away from the ever-present weight of the family's legacy. From the moment Bolin arrived in Lagos, the city gripped him. The bustling streets were alive with the cacophony of voices, the rich aroma of street food, and the energy of ambition and determination. It was in this city, teeming with life and color, that Bolin first met Marina Obiora. The encounter was serendipitous. Bolin had been exploring a local marketplace, entranced by the kaleidoscope of goods and cultures that surrounded him. Amid the sea of vendors and shoppers, he saw her, Marina, standing at a stall, haggling over the price of a hand-woven fabric. Her voice was firm but warm, her laughter rich and genuine as she bantered with the merchant. She was unlike anyone Bolin had ever met. Her dark, confident eyes held a spark of determination, and the way she carried herself, poised, assured, left him captivated. For a man who had spent his life surrounded by polished politeness and calculated interactions, Marina's authenticity was like a breath of fresh air. "You're staring," Ming muttered beside him, snapping Bolin out of his trance. Bolin straightened, trying to appear nonchalant. "I wasn't staring." Ming smirked. "Go on then. Talk to her. Let's see how the great How Bolin fares in a marketplace of romance." Bolin hesitated, but something about Marina compelled him to step forward. He approached the stall, feigning interest in the fabrics. "Quite the negotiator, aren't you?" he said, his Mandarin accented English catching her attention. Marina turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "And you are?" Bolin extended his hand. "How Bolin? I'm new to Lagos." Marina's gaze lingered on him, assessing. She didn't take his hand. "Well, how Bolin? If you're new here, I suggest you avoid standing in the middle of a market unless you enjoy getting robbed." Her bluntness took him by surprise, but he found himself smiling. "I'll keep that in mind. Maybe you could give me a few more tips?" Marina rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a small smile. "You want tips? Don't pay full price for anything, and never assume you can charm your way into a discount." "I wasn't trying to charm you," Bolin replied, his grin widening. "But is it working?" Marina laughed, a sound that made the chaos of the market fade into the background. Not even close. What began as a chance encounter turned into something more. Bolin found himself seeking out Marina's company, drawn to her intelligence and unshakable confidence. She wasn't impressed by his wealth or the weight of his name. In fact, she didn't seem to care who he was at all. For once in his life, Bolin felt like he could be himself without the expectations of his family hanging over him. They spent afternoons exploring Lagos together, walking along the coastline, visiting art galleries, and sampling street food from vendors who greeted Marina like an old friend. Bolin discovered new sides of himself in her presence, a sense of freedom, humor, and vulnerability he had never known he possessed. But their bond wasn't built on light-hearted moments alone. Marina challenged Bolin in ways no one else dared to. She questioned his assumptions, pushed him to think beyond the confines of his privileged life, and forced him to confront the truth about what he wanted for himself, not for his family's empire. "I think you're afraid," Marina said one evening, as they sat by the water, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "Afraid of what?" Bolin asked, genuinely curious. "Of being yourself," she replied, turning to face him. You're so used to living in someone else's shadow that you don't even know who you are. Her words struck a chord he didn't realize existed. For the first time, Bolin began to question the life he had accepted without hesitation. Months passed, and what started as a tentative friendship blossomed into a deep, unshakable love. Bolin had fallen for Marina's unwavering strength, her kindness, and her ability to see him for who he truly was. And Marina, despite her initial reservations, found herself drawn to Bolin's sincerity and the quiet determination behind his charm. One evening, Bolin surprised her by taking her to a rooftop overlooking the city. Strings of lights twinkled above them, and the sounds of Lagos hummed softly in the distance. "I've never been good at speeches," Bolin began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "But you've changed my life, Marina. You've shown me what it means to live, to love, and to be seen for who I really am." Marina's eyes widened as he dropped to one knee, a small box in his hand. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Marina was speechless. Then she smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "Yes, Bolin. 1,000 times, yes." Their wedding was intimate, with Ming as their sole witness. Bolin couldn't have been happier, as he vowed to share his life with Marina. But as they celebrated, a message from kdramakiss cut their joy short. Bolin was needed in China immediately. "I'll only be gone for a little while," Bolin promised Marina, holding her close. "As soon as I can, I'll bring you to China to meet my family. I want them to know the incredible woman I've married." Marina smiled, though her heart ached at the thought of being apart. "Just don't keep me waiting too long." With one final kiss, Bolin boarded the plane back to China, unaware of the storm that awaited him. How Bolin had always lived in the shadow of greatness. kdramakiss, the man he called his uncle, was a figure of immense power and influence, revered as the patriarch of their vast family empire. To Bolin, kdramakiss was both a mentor and an enigma, a man who guided his every step while keeping him at arm's length. But Bolin had never questioned the gaps in his own history. His parents' absence was a quiet ache he carried but never explored. It seemed natural to assume they had left the world too early, leaving kdramakiss to step into the role of protector. That belief held firm until the day an urgent message summoned him back to China. The call had come abruptly. kdramakiss's voice was uncharacteristically sharp. "You must return home immediately," he said. "The business needs your attention." When Bolin arrived at the family estate, the air was heavy with tension. The grand hall, always a place of refined elegance, now felt suffocating. kdramakiss greeted him with a stiff nod, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a palpable urgency. Dinner that night was a quiet affair. kdramakiss barely spoke, his eyes lingering on Bolin with an intensity that made him uneasy. Ming, ever the silent guardian, stood at a respectful distance, but even his presence seemed more watchful than usual. Later that evening, kdramakiss summoned Bolin to a private meeting. The room was dimly lit, the flickering glow of ancient lanterns casting long shadows on the walls. kdramakiss stood by a mahogany desk, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. "Bolin," he began, his voice steady but strained, "there's something I need to tell you, something I've kept from you for far too long." Bolin felt a chill run down his spine. "What is it?" kdramakiss turned, his expression heavy with a mix of guilt and resolve. "I am not your uncle, Bolin. I am your father." For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Bolin's breath caught, his heart pounding in his chest. "What are you talking about?" "My parents, they're gone." "No," kdramakiss said, his voice breaking. "Your mother is gone. She died protecting you. But I have been here all along, watching over you, keeping you safe." kdramakiss sank into a chair, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his confession. Years ago, your mother and I built this empire from nothing. We started with a small trading company, working day and night to carve out a place in a world that was not kind to dreamers. She was my partner in every sense. Her intelligence and resolve matched only by her love for you. He paused, his gaze distant. But with success came enemies, people who wanted what we had built. We knew the danger, but we never imagined they would go so far. When you were just a child, we discovered a plot to eliminate us all, to take the empire and leave no heirs. Bolin sat frozen, the gravity of his father's words sinking in. So you hid me. We had no choice, Chaoxiang replied. Your mother insisted. She said we could rebuild the empire if we lost it, but we could never replace you. So we staged your mother's death and sent her into hiding. I took on the role of your uncle to keep you safe. And my mother? Bolin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Chaoxiang's expression darkened. She couldn't stay hidden forever. They found her. She died protecting the secret of who you were. Bolin's hands clenched into fists. And Ming? He's been by my side my entire life. Did he know? Chaoxiang nodded. Ming was trained from the beginning to protect you. He is more than just your cousin. He is your shield. Everything we did was to ensure you survived. Bolin's jaw tightened, anger and pain swirling in his chest. And all this time, you let me think I was just another piece of the puzzle, that I was just ordinary. Chaoxiang stood, placing a firm hand on Bolin's shoulder. You are not ordinary, Bolin. You are the heir to everything your mother and I fought for. And now, the Shadow Circle knows who you are. They will stop at nothing to destroy you. Later that night, Bolin wandered through the estate, his mind spinning. He found himself in an old study, surrounded by relics of his family's past. Among the shelves of books and trinkets, he noticed a small chest tucked away in the corner. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with a faded red ribbon. One envelope bore his name in elegant handwriting. His hands trembled as he opened it. My dearest Bolin, if you are reading this, it means you have grown into the man I always knew you could be. I wish I could see you now, to hold you and tell you how proud I am. But life has its own plans, and my greatest hope is that you will find strength in the love we have always carried for you. Your father and I built this empire together, not for wealth or power, but for you. You are the light of our lives, the reason we kept going even when the world seemed determined to break us. The world will ask much of you, Bolin. It will demand sacrifices, test your resolve, and challenge your heart. But remember this, you are not alone. The blood of those who came before you flows in your veins, and their strength is yours to draw upon. Be brave, my son, and when the world feels too heavy, know that we are with you, always. With all my love, your mother. Bolin's vision blurred with tears as he folded the letter and placed it against his heart. He rose from the floor, a new fire burning in his chest. They gave everything for me, he murmured, and I didn't even know. Ming's voice broke the silence. Now you do, and it's time you start fighting for them. The revelation had shaken Hao Bolin to his core. His entire world, built on the foundation of his supposed ordinariness, had crumbled in a single moment. Chaoxiang's words, I am your father, reverberated in his mind like the toll of a bell, each echo bringing more questions, more anger, and more fear. They know who you are now, Chaoxiang had warned, his voice heavy with foreboding. The Shadow Circle has made their move. They will not stop until you are gone. While Bolin wrestled with the truth, the Shadow Circle began its assault. For years, they had lingered in the shadows, dismantling the Empire's defenses piece by piece. But now, with the confirmation that Bolin was the heir, they launched a coordinated attack. The first strike came quietly. An inside man among the estate staff cut the security feed, plunging the compound into darkness. Moments later, an explosion rocked the outer gates, sending plumes of smoke and fire into the night sky. Alarms blared, and the once quiet estate was thrown into chaos. Ming burst into the pavilion, his face grim. "They're here," he said simply. Bolin stood, his fists clenched. "Who?" "The Shadow Circle," Ming replied. "They've come for you." Before Bolin could respond, kdramakiss appeared, flanked by 2 armed guards. "Ming, take him to the safe room," he ordered. His voice was calm, but there was steel in his tone. "I'll hold them off." "No," Bolin protested. "You can't." "You will listen to me," kdramakiss interrupted, his eyes blazing. "For once in your life, Bolin, trust me. This is bigger than you or me." As Ming dragged Bolin toward the underground safe room, the sound of gunfire echoed through the halls. Bolin's heart pounded in his chest, not from fear for his own life, but for the man he now knew as his father. "Let me go," Bolin shouted, struggling against Ming's grip. "I can't just leave him." "You have no choice," Ming snapped. "Your father's orders were clear. My job is to keep you alive." They reached the heavy steel door of the safe room, but before they could enter, a deafening blast shook the ground beneath them. Dust and debris filled the air, and Bolin stumbled, coughing. "Stay here," Ming commanded. "I'll handle this." "No," Bolin shouted. But before he could stop him, Ming disappeared into the chaos. Bolin waited, every second feeling like an eternity. Finally, the door creaked open, and Ming reappeared, blood streaking his face. His expression was grim. "Bolin, he's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" Bolin demanded, his voice cracking. "You're lying." Ming's silence was the only answer. kdramakiss, the man who had lied to him for his entire life, but had also protected him with unwavering devotion, was dead. The Shadow Circle had claimed their prize, but they had failed to take the true heir. Bolin sat in the safe room, the weight of his father's sacrifice pressing down on him like a crushing wave. He replayed their last conversation in his mind, each word now carrying a deeper meaning. "You trust yourself," kdramakiss had said, "and you trust Ming. He'll stay by your side long after I'm gone." He looked at the photograph of his parents trembling in his hands. His mother, radiant and strong, cradled him as a baby. kdramakiss, his father, stood beside her, proud and determined. The family he had lost, the sacrifices they had made, all to protect him from an enemy he never knew existed. Bolin's grip on the photograph tightened. The anger and confusion that had clouded his mind began to clear, replaced by a burning determination. He looked up at Ming, who stood silently by the door, his expression unreadable. Did he say anything before?" Bolin's voice trailed off, the question too painful to finish. Ming nodded. "He said you're ready, and that you need to fight, not just for him, but for what he and your mother built." Bolin swallowed hard, the tears in his eyes threatening to spill. "Then I will." The first weeks after Hao Bolin's departure were filled with anticipation for Marina. Every time the phone rang or the doorbell chimed, her heart leapt with the hope that Bolin had finally returned. She replayed their last moments together, his promise to come back soon still fresh in her mind. But as the weeks turned into months, hope gave way to doubt. Marina sat alone one evening in their modest Lagos apartment, her hands resting on the dining table where they had shared so many late-night conversations. The silence was deafening. One morning, as the sunlight poured through the window, Marina's world shifted. A small test on the bathroom counter confirmed what her body had already been telling her. She was pregnant. For a moment, joy swept through her, a warm glow spreading as she imagined Bolin's reaction. He would be ecstatic, she thought. She could already see his expression, the way his eyes would light up when she told him he was going to be a father. But as the days stretched on, her joy began to waver under the weight of his absence. Where was he? Why hadn't he come back? The thought she feared most began to creep in. Had Bolin abandoned her? While Marina waited in Lagos, Bolin was fighting to stay alive in China. The Shadow Circle's pursuit had left him no choice but to go underground, his once mighty presence reduced to whispers and shadows. Every day was a battle to reclaim the empire that was rightfully his, while evading the enemy's relentless attempts to find and destroy him. "I have to go to Lagos," Bolin said one evening, his voice firm as he paced in the dimly lit hideout. The worn map of the city lay sprawled across the table, marked with red circles and notes in Ming's precise handwriting. Ming stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "That's not an option." Bolin turned sharply. "She's waiting for me. I promised her I'd come back." "She's safer where she is," Ming replied, his tone measured but unyielding. "Do you think you'll make it out of here alive if you leave now? The Shadow Circle will trace your every step. You'll be leading them straight to her." Bolin clenched his fists, his frustration mounting. "I can't just abandon her." "You're not abandoning her," Ming said, his voice softening. "You're protecting her." Despite Ming's words, Bolin's resolve didn't waver. "Then send me with protection. Whatever it takes, I need to see her." Ming sighed, knowing Bolin's determination wouldn't be easily swayed. "I'll go," he said finally. "I'll check on her for you, but you stay here. If you want her to stay alive, you'll trust me." Reluctantly, Bolin nodded. "Make sure she knows. I haven't forgotten her."